This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar. We're happy to see you here this morning. This morning's subject matter is financial risk. And the idea behind our webinar titled Revamp Your Plan is for those of us who are looking to maybe take this moment's pause from the last 2+ years of things being changed and changed for ourselves. So this morning, I'm Marianne Miller with Stay Local, and I'm the program manager here, and we're happy to welcome Marigny deMauriac, whose professional expertise is on this subject. And so we'll hear from Marigny in just a minute. First, I wanted to, for those of you who are unaware or need to learn a little bit more about us, I wanted to make sure you know that Stay Local is Greater New Orleans Independent Business Alliance. So today's comments we have Marigny here with a breadth of knowledge, and we'll try to bring out of her knowledge a little bit of information that's specific to the individual investor, but as also a business owner, an entrepreneur, maybe a self-employed person. So if you are here for that information, you are in the right place. Stay Local, as the New Orleans Independent Business Alliance, we strengthen the environment for independent business owners and for independent businesses. So we do that through connecting you to one another, through networking and through educational events like this. We're happy that you've joined us today. We also work to advocate to help amplify the voice of the independent business owner, right? You have a lot to do. So also speaking about your own issues may not be something that you always have the time to do, and we're here for that. We are a nonprofit organization, and because we're dedicated to strengthening the local economy, we very much welcome members. So individual business owners, individual businesses which are members of Stay Local are welcome. We can provide some information to you in the email afterward about joining. And a lot of folks who follow our message about buying local, shopping local, supporting local, choosing local, they may be looking for you. And so becoming an individual member business of Stay Local helps those folks who are consumers or residents or your employees, anybody who's looking to say, well, what is a local business? We can help them find you. And so that's something we'd like you to consider as well. We'd like to thank the following businesses that do give us some significant support: Precision Payment Systems, Energy Smart, Parkway Bakery, and our partner at LCI Workers Comp also helps a lot throughout the year. And we are an initiative of the Urban Conservancy. So all of these partners and resources bring to bear on Stay Local what we can provide to you as the business owner. So thank you so much for joining today. We're going to keep this talk to an hour, certainly. And we would like next to introduce Marigny. Marigny is a graduate of Loyola University and an 8-year veteran of the finance industry. She has earned Accredited Asset Management Specialist designation, and she's a certified financial planner. And those are just two of the many things that I think help us know more about Marigny. But I think beyond the letters, her approach, being someone who really tries to tailor advice and information, is something that really brought her to us today to say, you know, what Marigny can provide is something that's so valuable. So let's have a discussion among business owners where she's the one helping you all. So please consider that Marigny's presentation today is full of facts and information. She's going to start, but also ask your question in the chat and raise your hand anytime. Thank you, Marigny.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm really happy to be here, and I do love Stay Local, so I'm glad that you guys asked me to participate. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I've been trying to kind of track and see if new people are hopping on, but I'm going to share my screen. And if you guys will just participate in the chat as you have questions, I want to make sure that we make plenty of time to answer questions throughout, and also we'll leave some time at the end for a discussion. Let me see if I can All right, there we go. Can you see that screen? Okay, Mary Ann, okay, great. As Mary Ann mentioned, my name is Marigny deMauriac. I have my own personal financial planning firm. It's women-owned. I work with probably 99% women investors, which is unusual in the finance industry. And today I want to speak about revamping your plans. So this is catered towards business owners, particularly small business owners, but I will cover some topics that really impact the individual investor as well. So with that being said, first, let's just go through the requisite disclaimers. This content can't be used for the purpose of avoiding any federal tax penalties. Just make sure that you're consulting with your own legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your situation. And obviously the opinions and materials expressed here are for general educational information, and it shouldn't be considered a solicitation. Today, we're going to cover some known risks to your business and finances and what you can do to safeguard your assets. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. First, let's just open it up in the chat if you all have any thoughts about this, but what are some possible risks that you've identified to your business this year? And let's be honest, being alive right now is a risk. So there's really no way to completely avoid risk. It's being alive is better than the alternative, but we're just going to talk about identifying risks and really trying to manage as best as we can, because frankly, just being alive is a risk. Ooh, I see someone mentioned in the chat having records hacked. So we will talk about cybersecurity. One topic that you've probably read about a lot in the news recently is inflation. We hear that word a lot. Some folks maybe don't fully understand what inflation is or why it's a topic that's top of mind right now. I see some supply chain issues, rising costs, holding on to employees. These are all very valid risks to business right now. Let's speak about inflation, which supply chain stuff is impacting. Why does inflation happen? If you're a client of mine, we've discussed this, but number one is the surge in product demand. The second is cost of production. And the third is supply chain breakdowns. So right now we're experiencing higher costs of a lot of things across the board. And there is really not much you can do to, as an individual person, prevent inflation from happening. It's managing that on your own, managing your personal economy. So we'll discuss what to do when it comes to inflation and the fact that it is something beyond our individual control. How do we manage our finances given the fact that inflation is so prevalent, that high inflation is prevalent. Historically, it's not the highest it's ever been, but it is higher than what we're used to for the last several decades. So someone else mentions a business risk. Restricted travel reduces capacity to tap into past clients for future work. Or more expensive travel, right? If you've tried to book a flight in recent weeks, travel is a little bit more expensive than it was last year when you were trying to book flights. Some other possible risks to your business: economic risk, compliance risk, security and fraud risk, someone mentioned, financial risk, operational risk, reputational risk, and competition. Economic risk, frankly, there's not a lot we can do to control that risk. This could include things like foreign exchange risk, when companies are involved in the exchange of foreign currency, or when society is struggling to manage existing resources, if we're going through a fiscal crisis. So an example of economic risk, if you think way back, we've had many times in history where this has been an issue in our country and in other countries too. So if you think about Greece in 2007 and their debt crisis, if you think about right now in Sri Lanka, what's happening, another example would be hyperinflation in Venezuela in 2013, when prices of goods and services in Venezuela went up by 41%. And by 2018, inflation rose by 65%. So there's a lot of different times in history where economic risk has come into play, and not just here, but many other countries. We're not even close. Just for those with concerns about inflation and economic risk, we're not even close to experiencing what some of these other countries that people like to view, these kind of fear-mongering folks, we're not even close to experiencing what some of these other countries have already. So there are some ways you can manage your own personal economy to get through the current inflation scenario. Economic risk is simply the possibility that changes in economic conditions are going to negatively impact a company. And anyone that has been in business through COVID knows that this experience could have negatively impacted your company, or maybe you pivoted and you were able to capitalize on a new venture, and you took a risk, but it paid off. Compliance risk are penalties resulting from a failure to act in line with industry regulations. So in my industry, finance, for example, regulations are changing pretty frequently. So keeping up to date with those regulations and making sure that internal policies are up to date with those regulations is essential. We could be fined, we could be shut down if we're not keeping up with those regulations. Security and fraud risk, I think everyone is aware of that risk at this point. It's been in the news quite a bit, especially with regards to cyber attacks and data breaches or fraudulent activity, both to your organization or possibly also to your personal accounts. And then financial risk is a possibility of losing money on an investment or a business venture. Other risks, operational risk. This is like your day-to-day operations, dealing with the people and systems in your organization. Reputational risk could be if you fail to meet the expectations of your business stakeholders, if an executive maybe gets some bad PR, your reputation could be at risk. Competition risk is maintaining your competitive edge in a market where there are other providers of the same service. And weather risks. This is something, along the Gulf Coast we're highly aware of. Extreme weather risks causing business interruptions and financial losses. But certainly it's not only the Gulf Coast. We're seeing, global warming. It's global. So all over the place, with these extreme weather events of varying types. So we'll talk about how to try to plan and manage for increasing weather risks. Does anyone have ideas for folks that were participating in the chat, and you mentioned some of these risks to your business? What is one way that you're trying to manage that risk? Like, for example, holding on to employees or being, that as a risk. What are some ways that you've identified that are, you're able to retain loyal employees?
Marigny, I think Nikki has answered in terms of cybersecurity.
I see Nikki. Yeah, I see improved cyber systems. Great, Nikki. I see Dana saying planning further ahead with purchases, identifying new vendors. And that was with regard to the comment about supply chain issues and rising costs. Certainly, yeah, planning further ahead and making the purchases you're going to have to make a year from now. That can be a great way also to hedge against inflation. If you think things are going to get more expensive towards the year end, and maybe you've been month to month on a contract, is there a way to save yourself some money going with an annual contract and doing that now versus waiting until a year from now, or doing navigating your inventory, maybe making orders earlier rather than waiting. Oop. I want to go back. So I mentioned inflation and managing inflation. This is something, so not all industries are struggling in the same way when it comes to inflation as a risk. Some industries are actually benefiting from inflation. Companies that are in the consumer staples space, for example, energy, healthcare, utilities, and real estate, all historically benefit from inflation. Right now with information technology, historically that sector hasn't benefited from inflation. However, with us being within the context of COVID and the higher reliance on technology, even though historically information technology doesn't perform well when inflation is high, we could see that change just given the current climate. Maybe that sector becomes less cyclical because there's increased demand for information technology. As a business owner or as an individual investor, even when it comes to managing inflation risk, some of you may be familiar with the 50-30-20 rule. This is an oversimplification of the idea of budgeting. So for someone that doesn't want to go through in your personal or business finances, and hopefully you are taking the time to line item your budget, but if you're not, and you just want to have better practices about where your money is going, something that has been used in the past is this 50-30-20 rule. And this is a budget rule that is a simple plan to help people meet financial goals. And it simply means that you should be taking 50% of your budget, and that could be spent on needs, things like housing, electricity. What are your essentials, things that are obligations or must-haves? Then 30% going towards wants, or your variable expenses, things like cable, your streaming services, subscriptions, your wants, and then the remaining 20 going towards savings or investments. The reality is this historic simple plan that people could have used, now if your expenses are higher because of inflation with your needs, so things like housing expenses in some places might be 61% of your income. Depending on what city you're in, that housing expense might be a lot higher than it was 2 years ago. So this 50-30-20 rule, which is a nice just simplification of where your money should be going without having to line item a budget. You just, okay, this is how much I brought in this month. This is where I need to put my money, especially as an independent business owner, if your income is varying. That can be a good basic rule, but in reality, if your needs are more than 50% of your expense, then you have a few things you need to consider. So one would be, you might have to reduce your spending on your wants. Alternatively, you may have to reduce your savings and investments or adjust your timeline for meeting your goals. If you're taking out of what you were putting in savings and investments, and that's now going towards needs, your timeline may need to adjust. Or I like this option better because it means you don't have to forego wants or savings and investments. Look at additional revenue streams. So if more of your money is going towards needs, you want to keep your wants, you want to continue saving and investing, look at ways to add revenue streams. I think it's just more positive than operating from a scarcity mindset where you have to cut out something, maybe add somewhere that's going to improve your situation instead. So for example, right now we know real estate is just totally unhinged, and that is going to be a higher expense for a lot of people, but maybe you are looking at diversifying your investments, and real estate could be a way for you to add additional income. Or maybe your investment portfolio could become an income producer for you to supplement what you have in your business as far as income. Maybe you look at, in your business, adding an additional service offering, a subscription offering, something that's going to be a recurring revenue source. There are a lot of options here that don't operate from a scarcity space and instead look at increasing your revenue to cover these higher expenses. There are a lot of ways to manage economic risk. We obviously can't control the economy. We truly cannot control what's happening in a larger economic scale, but we can try to control our personal economy. So looking at things like fostering our professional and personal relationships, staying prepared for public health risks, looking at better aligning with consumer preferences and being open to shifting our plans, diversifying our assets, which I just mentioned, regularly assessing risks to your cash flow and business plan, and being vigilant with that. So getting comfortable with change. We cannot control what's happening on a global scale, but we can control our actions each day and how we can be comfortable with change and reevaluate what we're doing. A quick note, another risk is obviously market risk, and that can impact if you're an investor. We also cannot control the general market trends, but we can control the risk that we take in our individual portfolios, diversifying our accounts and making sure that how we're invested is in line with our personal goals and timelines. So now could be a good time to revisit your investment portfolio. Is it in line with what you're trying to accomplish in the long term? And being self-aware as far as what emotions you have around investing and why those are there. We don't just feel a certain way about investing for no reason. Those feelings come from somewhere, whether it's how we were raised, what our experiences in the past have been working with financial professionals. We get these feelings about about investing from a greater context. So being more aware of how we feel when certain things happen in the market is essential to making more informed decisions. And so what this is showing you is there is a rhyme or reason to the way people feel about investing when certain things are happening on a global scale. So when markets are high and everything's going well, people feel a sense of euphoria. It's actually the most risk people can take on and people have the least worry. Whereas when there's a dip in the stock market, you can start to feel anxious, you could start to feel fearful. When things are looking really grim, people can panic. And that's actually where the most opportunities exist, but it's also the most worry. So simply understanding the range of emotions that you can have when investing and revisiting whether you're investing in line with what you're trying to accomplish or if your plans need to adjust. That is very helpful, especially right now. Compliance risk is another risk to business. I won't dig too deeply in here, but staying up to date with regulations in your industry, evaluating your processes for staying compliant, keeping policies that are up to date and practices that are up to date, performing your own due diligence in your business, and with your third parties. So if you work with third party vendors, making sure that if your industry is regulated, which many are, I know mine is, if you have any third party vendors that you work with, you need to also make sure that they're compliant and that you're doing your own due diligence on your third parties that you're working with. Having enforcement policies. So what's your plan if an employee is not keeping up with these various compliance rules that your business needs to? So also creating a culture of ethics, integrity, and compliance. So that might not mean being punitive. If an employee makes a mistake, that will happen. People are human. So making sure that you have a workplace that is supportive and where people can freely speak up if they're not sure about something, that's, to me, actually more important than having a punitive type of an environment. You want people to speak up if they're not sure if something's right, so that you can remedy the situation. This risk to business is getting quite a bit of attention in the media right now, fraud risk, and also cybersecurity risk. A few different ways to try to manage fraud risk. First and foremost starts with identifying weaknesses, your own weaknesses. So taking some time to reflect on where you could have weaknesses in your business and be open to fraud. And that assessment may begin with working with your employees and being transparent. That you just have to have a holistic understanding of how your if you have employees, how your employees are interacting with company resources on a day-to-day basis. Identifying vulnerabilities. Your employees sometimes can also help you identify possible vulnerabilities. You also want to adopt and communicate a plan with procedures in place with your entire team so that everyone knows what preventative measures you're taking, what assessments you're going to do on a regular basis, what internal controls you have in place. You can implement fraud detection tools that alert employees about potential fraud. And again, just creating a culture of ethics, integrity, and compliance. So not necessarily punitive, but you want people to be open if they're noticing things. You want people to communicate with you what their concerns are, and you want to monitor and document what's happening. And if you have key stakeholders, also communicate what you're doing to manage fraud risk, cybersecurity risk, all of these various risks. You can document what your plan is as a business owner and communicate those with your employees, your business partners, and your other stakeholders. Managing cybersecurity is huge right now. A quick way to cover the huge expense that can come from cybersecurity breaches is simply transferring that risk by getting cybersecurity insurance. So cybersecurity insurance covers things like breach costs, extortion, cyber crimes, business interruptions that could occur, data recovery, and various forms of privacy protection. I'm curious too, are there things that you all are doing when it comes to cybersecurity, or things that, within your business, that how are you managing when it comes to cybersecurity? Because that one has been a hot topic as of late with what's going on just globally. Well, I see someone also commented earlier, doing more work virtually, which is hard in the construction world. Yep, it is. How are you all managing? Oh, I see we use LastPass for cybersecurity. Okay. Avoiding phishing emails, two-step authentication, changing passwords monthly. Great. Yeah, so you could see some of those best practices. Nikki, you're already doing them. Two-step authentication, great. Yeah, a lot of accounts already are going to prompt you to set up two-step authentication. You can also set up, so some other general best practices. So someone mentions two-step verification or authentication. Any new accounts you set up now are pretty much going to prompt you to set that up. So that's great. You can also set up security alerts or digital notifications. I would encourage you to set that up on any banking that you have. A lot of bank accounts, business and personal, will let you set these alerts if activities are happening to just text you an alert. And I saw someone also mentioned phishing, being suspicious of phishing. So being suspicious of unsolicited phone calls, emails, texts, being cautious when you're sharing sensitive information, and also not disclosing confidential information in public areas. Someone says, I do have a fraud alert. It gets annoying, but definitely erring on the side of caution. Yeah, I know. Sometimes we feel so protected that we're protected from ourselves, and it's a little frustrating sometimes with the two-step verification and every website requiring different things for new passwords, but it is for our own protection. So we have to roll with the punches a little bit.
I just wanted to chip in too. This is Marianne. The cybersecurity business website that Homeland Security and some other government agencies have put together has some really great downloadable, because I think part of what we're saying too is like your staff, right? You may have these practices in place, but for some of us, not knowing the background of the person working, they may be the one that's more exposed to a phishing mechanism to try to get information. So there are some really great downloadable resources on cybersecurity for your business.
Yeah, can you will you type that link into the chat for people as well? Yeah, that, I think if there's nothing else people get from this visit in general, it's that all of these ways to manage risk in your business, a lot of business owners are already doing some of these things, but if you have employees, there has to be a process in place that's repeatable, that you can teach your employees, and there needs to be an open line of communication about, what are best practices for things like keeping your technology up to date, avoiding phishing emails. A lot of business owners I know are extremely responsible, proactive entrepreneurs. They're already taking a lot of these steps, but sometimes employees aren't, and that's where the vulnerability is. So there has to be an open line of communication with your employees, and maybe even regular trainings, which doesn't sound so fun sometimes, but it's essential to make sure that everyone on your team knows what to do when these situations occur. Things like making sure you're on secure websites, even checking to make sure that your website that you're on is verified, downloading apps only from Google Play or Apple App Stores. A lot of employees being remote are operating off of cell phones or laptops. So making sure that those employees are using secure websites, that they're logging out and terminating access to like your proprietary, if you have a proprietary online software that you use that has client data on it, you just need to make sure that if you have employees that are working remote, that there are standard practices in place where if they're not on their computer, they're logging out completely and terminating access so that you don't leave client information vulnerable, and that they're not visiting websites that they don't recognize. Again, this speaks to working with remote staff. A lot of folks are doing work in coffee shops or co-working environments, or from home, various locations. So being extremely cautious when you're on public networks, avoiding using public computers. If you're using a public computer, making sure you're clearing the browser settings and the history when you exit off that public computer. It's ideal if you're only using wireless that you trust. And it's really best if you can have your own VPN or private Wi-Fi, because that way that the traffic is encrypted. People can't see what you're doing online. It reduces any possible interference. Another way to reduce cyber risk is being strategic with your logins and passwords. Someone had mentioned changing passwords every month. That's great. And when you're selecting those passwords, try not to use super personal information that's easy to find online, like your birthday or your pet's name, or that type of personal information you want to try to avoid in your passwords. Creating unique passwords for different financial institutions and changing it. I say every quarter. It's great if you're doing it more often than that. That's very proactive. And don't share your passwords. We also spoke about setting up two-step verification, being aware of phishing attempts. Some companies will actually send like pretend practice phishing attempts to employees as like almost like a fire drill as a proactive measure, and then test the response rates so that it's then a conversation to have. This is a long list of things that you can do if you think your information has been compromised. So obviously you want to report it to any financial institutions, contact the fraud department of your credit card issuers, any companies you do business with. You want to notify them. You want to report the cybercrime to your local police, check your computer for any malware or spyware. Contact your credit bureaus. You can freeze your credit. You can also run a free credit report for yourself once annually at annualcreditreport.com. That's a legitimate website where you can run your credit once annually and just see if there's any suspicious activity. And you can report things that were not your activity. If you think your Social Security number has been compromised, you can call the Social Security Administration. You can file a complaint with the FTC. And obviously, if you think you've been breached, you want to change all your passwords and add additional safeguards. So these are all more reactive things to do if something's already happened, but very important if you feel like there's been any kind of breach of information. Managing operational risks, just again, promoting organization-wide understanding of your risk management plan. We may not have time to get totally into just preparing for all of the different disasters, but there are a lot of them as far as weather disasters as a risk. And the way that we prepare for each one may differ based on where you are and what disasters are most common in your area. This is something I speak on routinely. For all disasters, you need to have a family plan. For your personal stuff, for business owners, you also have to have a business contingency plan. Some industries like mine require that you have a business contingency plan. If I can't work from my normal work location because of a hurricane or a tornado, what's the contingency plan? Where am I going to work? How am I going to connect with clients? There has to be a plan in place. If you don't have a plan, FEMA provides free templates. And just like you would have this conversation with employees, you also want to have the conversation with your family members and loved ones of what your plans are. If communications are down, how will you have electrical backups? What's the most important information you need to keep on file? You want to have hard copies, digital copies, and you can duplicate for family and business. You want to have all the documents. I mean, I can't stress that enough. It's very hard to go back and try to find things like, photographs of property, something like that, for example. You want to have photographs of your property before a disaster strikes in case you need to file insurance claims. 12 ways to prepare for extreme weather events, regardless of what the weather event is. Signing up for alerts and warnings, making plans, saving for rainy day. So having enough in emergency funds to last you a few months if you're out of work, for example, or if your revenue can't come in for a business because your business has been interrupted. Looking at things like business interruption insurance. How are you going to keep revenue coming in if business has to stop from a weather event? Safeguarding important documents, having a plan for things like prescriptions, medical care, knowing the evacuation plans of your employees as well as yourself and their emergency contacts. Anyway, this is a long list of some things you can, well, it's not long, 12 different things you can do to get prepared. And I think Mary Ann had mentioned that resource earlier.
Okay. Well, she was mentioning that I had talked about a federal resource. It's more than Department of Homeland Security, but I dropped it in the chat. She's talked about a federal resource in terms of weather risk planning. the FEMA documents. I think in terms of some of the general notes of what we've touched upon, there are probably I'm seeing sort of two other external resources that could be really helpful. One that keeps coming up, right, is the concept of insurance. So, like cybersecurity insurance, don't know much about the cost of that. She did mention it, but certainly if you're in the market and you're looking for something like that, contact us at Stay Local, Marianne at staylocal.org. Within our network, so this is again going back to the idea that the member businesses in Stay Local's network are a resource for you. There are certainly insurance subject matter experts that can talk specifically for your business about what um, cyber insurance looks like for you. Um, Talking about business interruption, we obviously now all know from the series of events that has preceded this that a pandemic is not covered in your business interruption insurance, but what is? What are some of the other things? I did work with, or I have heard from one business owner in particular, not a commercial corridor Main Street sort of business, but a business in like a business park. uh, that utility interruption was covered. There was insurance because of a certain clause about how the private property was managed. That in that whole long, oh, hi, Mari's back. In that whole long power outage post Ida, they actually were insured because of the way in which their leases were tied to a utility provider. So there are different ways in which we at Stay Local can connect you with some of the folks that may answer your more specific insurance questions.
I think that that is super essential. A financial planner is really going to assist on the investments, managing the assets, managing the financial risk. But you really need to have a team of people, an accountant, an insurance, commercial insurance person that can help you with things like cyber insurance. Somebody who is an HR consultant can help you come up with these procedures to have in place, like even something as simple as a remote work procedure or policy would have been very helpful to many business owners going into COVID. And I don't think, who could have anticipated all of these in-person businesses suddenly going 100% remote with no plan in place for it. And so it's really hard, I know, because there are so many risks to try to anticipate and manage. So just start with like improving in one area. So something like, your remote work policy. What will happen if, a hurricane comes through and everyone has to go back to working remote? If you've been working hybrid, what's your plan for that? So just work in that one area and then go to the next thing. Having take some time to write down the top 3 areas that you want to improve. That's a great point, Marianne, is your financial planner is only going to assist in the finance side of things. You have to have a team. Okay. Lastly, I just wanted to share, this is really the last couple things that I wanted to do, is just share some resources that are free for anyone who could use them. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the SEC has a website that you can check out to make sure that you're creating procedures for cybersecurity, things to prevent scams, staying safe online. And then there's also a website called onguardonline.gov, which not necessarily for business owners, but for business owners with kids. This is a way to assist planning for kids and online safety and cybersecurity for those with kids. So for natural disasters, the CDC, I would also loop in health concerns under that website, DHS.gov, FEMA.gov, disastersafety.org, all great free resources. Obviously following weather.gov for your local weather updates, ready.gov for evacuation plans, your state and local government websites. For those, this has been expressed recently, concerns about things like bioterrorism. So ready.gov also has a link that's specific to bioterrorism for those that were concerned about that. for anyone who thinks that they've been a victim of identity theft, these are resources for identity theft, identitytheft.gov. This is contact information for any of the 3 credit bureaus that you would need to contact. The IRS website, and also the free annual credit report website that I mentioned earlier, which is where you can run your own free credit report once a year, which runs it for all 3 of the credit bureaus. And it actually gives you an option. You can select just one now, or you can run all 3. With that, I'll just open it up for Q&A for anyone that has questions or thoughts, or I'll send it back to you, Marianne, if you have anything you wanted to close with.
One thing I wanted to ask you while we have you is, and certainly if a chat pops up that you want to put in line above me, you talked about how your investments could become supplemental income, and I'm just thinking, and you're absolutely right. You don't want to design your plan, revamp your plan from a scarcity space. But it was one thing that I thought, well, we had you who really has experience with this. If you could speak to anyone who maybe was looking for a new line of business and needed some liquidity, right, because of the position they've been in from the past 2 years of responsiveness. So you had said it could be possible that you could use your investments as supplemental income. Probably not. You would want to advise for how long?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about investments as a passive income source, that's what every retiree is doing, right? They go from a point of growing and saving and investing for their entire working lives to then, whenever they retire, let's say age 65, from age 65 to 90, that retirement shifts to where it becomes an income source to supplement Social Security income. So the idea of using investments as an income source isn't unique or new. Retirees have been doing it for a very long time. The idea of being able to use investments as an income source before retirement is new to some people, but it shouldn't be. It's a way to diversify your earned income through work. And ideally, everyone wants to be able to be in a position where you don't have to work, you choose to work. So as a business owner, I think a lot of business owners don't realize business checking, savings accounts, those could also be investment accounts. You don't have, your revenue from your business can be used in multiple ways to create more revenue for yourself. Just like an individual person can have an investment brokerage account, business owners can diversify their income from earned income to then passive income. And it doesn't have to wait until you're retired. I don't know how many people are familiar with the FIRE movement, but that has to do with people who are younger being in a position where their passive income replaces their earned income, so they no longer have to work in their 30s, in their 40s. I don't know if that answers your question, but it comes from taking your earned income and turning it into passive income, whether that's through real estate, investment properties, investment portfolios. There are a number of things that you can do to take earned income where you have to work hourly, or salaried. You can take a portion of that money and dedicate it to something that then creates income, possibly 24 hours a day. I mean, you can only work 8 hours a day. So getting your money to work for you when you're sleeping is really ideal.
It does.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We got about a few more minutes if anyone has other questions. I don't want to rush y'all. Yeah, Marianne, that could be like a whole other talk, is just ways to create passive income.
Okay, well, Mary, if anyone's listening who needs you to say it out loud, I'd love for you to just read the slides so people know how to reach you with questions.
Oh, sure.
Along the lines of what we just discussed.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for me, here's my contact information. You can check out my website at deMauriac.com, DEMAURIAC.com. Feel free to reach out to me directly via email. It's Marigny at deMauriac.com, or connect with me on social at deMauriac. And thank you, Stay Local, for including me in this. You guys always do such a great job supporting local business. And I really appreciate having the connection with you all. So let's talk soon, and be well, my friends, to anyone who hopped on the call today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here, Marigny, and presenting such great information. Anybody who's looking, like I said, to broaden their network, staylocal.org/find is the directory of businesses that could be your first step, or you can contact me, Marianne at staylocal.org directly, and I can speak to you a little bit more about membership. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.